right, hello everybody and welcome to today's program. The topic of our program today is keeping your relationships healthy when their memories fade. And we are so honored today to be joined by two experts, Dr. Gary Chapman and Dr. Shannon Warden, and I'll introduce them and share a little bit more about their background in just a few minutes. But first, I wanted to introduce the partnership of the hosts that are bringing you this program today. So I am Christine Murray. I'm the director of the Center for Youth, Family, and Community Partnerships at UNC Greensboro. And I also oversee the Healthy Relationships Initiative, and it's the Healthy Relationships and Wellspring that's collaborating to bring this program to you today. We were hoping to do a live program, and we'd had that scheduled for a long time. But we're really grateful for the flexibility of our speakers and for all of you joining us for this virtual program as well. A little bit about the Healthy Relationships Initiative. The Healthy Relationships Initiative is a partnership between UNC Greensboro and the Phillips Foundation, and our mission is to promote happy, healthy, and safe relationships of all kinds. We work with a lot of different community partners to host events and share resources and information about a lot of different types of healthy relationships. So couple relationships, friendship, parenting, families, workplace relationships. And we share different types of resources such as online programs, our blog, and social media content as well. So feel free to check us out at healthyrelationshipsinitiative.org, as well as connect with us on social media to stay tuned and learn more about our different resources as they become available. And after that brief introduction, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jody from Wellspring to ask her to share a little bit about Wellspring and what they do.
Hey everybody, thank you. This is Jody with Wellspring Solutions, and thank you so much. On behalf of the Wellspring Solutions team, we're so pleased to partner on this very special event. Just to briefly share, I'm going to highlight, if you look at the screen here, we offer free and confidential memory screenings in the community. We are licensed to offer the Memory Fitness Program out of UCLA. We also are certified to offer the Dementia Dialogue Series out of USC. Oh, yeah. And we have our memory care center, and that is for individuals who are 60 or older with a diagnosis of dementia. We offer activities to engage our members, enhance memory and physical fitness. We have music, we have breakfast, lunch, and an afternoon snack. And we have staff to assist with our members' care needs, as well as a nurse to do healthcare monitoring. And we're open from 7:30 to 5:30 on Monday through Friday. We also have Connections, a memory club, which is an abbreviated day of socialization and engagement for seniors with a diagnosis of dementia. Lunch, music, exercise, movement, and opportunities for meaningful engagement are provided. And we are open from 10 to 2 and have 4 locations, 3 in Greensboro and 1 in High Point. And very importantly, both of those services offer family caregivers a much needed break from their caregiving responsibilities. We also offer caregiver education on a variety of different topics, really just honing in on the importance of self-care strategies, how to do direct care in terms of safe body mechanics and communication tips. We have 3 support groups. We offer home care, and we also have our navigator program. Nicole is our navigator, and she can come and visit with you at no charge to just do an assessment and try to get a sense of what services will best meet your needs, whether they're with Wellspring Solutions or not. So obviously we've had to adapt our programs and services to meet the needs of caregivers since COVID. So if you want any information about how we're operating or about our virtual programming, please visit us at well-springsolutions.org, or you can give us a call. Thank you again, and I'm so glad you're here to enjoy the program.
Thank you, Jody. And now is what everybody's been waiting for. We just wanted to share a little bit about the organizations, but what everybody's been waiting for, we know, is to hear from Dr. Chapman and Dr. Warden. So before I turn it over to them, I'm going to give a real brief introduction. Of course, if I read their full bios, that would take up the whole hour because they're both so accomplished and have so much expertise on this topic, as well as many other topics related to Healthy Relationships Initiative. But just to give a little bit of background about our speakers, if you're not familiar with them, of course, Dr. Chapman, well-known author of the best-selling 5 Love Languages series, This series has sold more than 12 million copies worldwide and has been translated into over 50 languages. Dr. Chapman travels the world presenting seminars on marriage, family, and relationships, and has radio programs that air on hundreds of stations. Also, he's the senior associate pastor at Calvary Baptist Church in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And later in the program, you'll hear from Dr. Shannon Warden, and she's a professional counselor. She's been counseling children, families, young adults, women, and couples since 1998. And she's the director of counseling and director of women's ministries at Triad Baptist Church, as well as she's a licensed clinical mental health counselor and supervisor in North Carolina. And Dr. Chapman and Dr. Warden make a great team, and together they wrote the DIY Guide to Building a Family That Lasts. So with that introduction, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Dr. Chapman. So thanks again for being here today.
Well, thank you very much. And it's good to be here with Dr. Warden and with all of you who are tuned in today. I want to talk about the love aspect of loving the dementia patient. And Dr. Warden's going to talk about taking care of yourself if you're the caregiver. Okay, that's kind of the direction in which we're going. As you well know, there are millions of people in this country who have dementia of one sort or another. The book that I wrote on this topic focused on the Alzheimer's journey, but the other forms of dementia are certainly, just as detrimental to relationships. And it's a very difficult journey. I don't have to tell you if you've been on the journey or if you've been working with those who have. So what I want to talk about is the value of love, emotional love on this journey, and how to communicate love effectively to the patient. What I discovered years and years ago, I want to give you a little background before I talk about how this works with the dementia patient. But I think almost everyone agrees that our deepest need, emotional need on the human level, is the need to feel loved by the significant people in our lives. And if you're married, that would be your spouse. If you feel loved by your spouse, really life is beautiful. But if you don't feel loved, life can begin to look pretty dark. But what I discovered is that what makes one person feel loved doesn't necessarily make another person feel loved. And never forget the day I first encountered this reality. A couple came into my office. I'd never met them, found out they'd been married to each other for 20 years. And she said, Dr. Chapman, I just don't feel any love coming from him. He lives his life, I live my life. We don't fight, but there's just nothing going on emotionally between us. And she said, I feel so empty, and I don't know how long I can go on like this. I looked at her husband, and he said, I don't understand that. He said, I vacuum the floors for her. I wash the dishes. He said, I start the evening meal before she gets home. And he said, I wash the car on Saturday, and I help her with the laundry, and I mow the grass. And why would she not feel loved? He got through with that litany, and I was beginning to ask myself, what does this woman do? It sounded to me like she was doing everything. He was doing everything. And she said, he's right. He's a hardworking man, but we don't ever talk. She said, we haven't talked in 20 years. He's always doing this, doing this, doing this, doing that. And I realized that he was sincere, but he was missing her emotionally. And after that, I heard similar stories in my marriage counseling office over and over again. And I knew there was a pattern to it, but I didn't know what it was. So eventually I took time to sit down and read several years of notes that I made when I was counseling people, and ask myself the question, when someone sat in my office and said, I feel like my spouse doesn't love me, what did they want? What were they complaining about? And their answers fell into 5 categories, and I later called them the 5 love languages. So I want to just briefly share these 5 with you, and then I want to show you how this works in the caregiver-patient relationship. If you've read the book, the original book, you know this will be a review for you, okay? If you haven't read the book, it'll be an introduction. One of the love languages is words of affirmation. You look nice in that outfit, really appreciate what you did. One of the things I like about you, It's simply using words to affirm the other person. There's an ancient Hebrew proverb that says life and death is in the power of the tongue. You can kill people, you can give them life by the way you talk to them. For some people, words of affirmation is their love language. This is what really communicates to them on an emotional level. A second love language is acts of service, doing something for the other person that you know they would like for you to do. That's the language that the gentleman I just talked about was speaking. He was doing all those things for her. Do you remember the old saying, actions speak louder than words? If this is their love language, actions will speak louder than words. And then there's gifts. It's universal to give gifts as an expression of love. The gift says, they were thinking about me. Look what they got from me. And the gift doesn't have to be expensive. We've always said it's the thought that counts. But I remind people, it's not the thought left in your head that counts. It's the gift that came out of the thought in your head, okay? A man told me just the other week, he said, you know, Dr. Chapman, I was taking a walk and I saw a bird feather. And I picked it up and took it home. And I said to my wife, honey, while I was walking, I saw this bird feather, and I want you to have it because it reminded me that you are the wind beneath my wings. I love you. Wow. Didn't cost a penny. He gave her a gift and words of affirmation. For some people, gifts speak deeply to them emotionally. Then there's quality time, giving the person your undivided attention. I do not mean sitting on the couch watching television together. Someone else has your attention. I'm talking about sitting down, the TV's off, the computer's down, you're not answering the phone, you have each other's undivided attention, you're sharing life together, you're walking down the road together, you're going out to eat together, but they have your full attention. Number 5 is physical touch. We've long known the emotional power of physical touch. That's why we pick up babies and hold them and kiss them and cuddle them. Long before the baby understands the meaning of the word love, the baby feels love by physical touch. Now in marriage, that's such things as holding hands and kissing and embracing, the whole sexual part of the marriage, arm around the shoulder, putting your hand on their leg, just affirming physical touches. And the simple idea is this, that out of those 5 love languages, each of us has a primary love language. One of the 5 speaks more deeply to us emotionally than the other 4. We can receive love in all 5, but if we had to give up one, we'd give up this one and then this one, but never this one. This is the one that really makes me feel love. It's very similar to spoken language. Every one of us grew up speaking a language with a dialect, and that's the one we understand best. We call it our native tongue. I grew up speaking English, Southern style. That's my native tongue. The same thing is true with love. It's important to understand the other person's primary love language. You see, that husband was sincere, but he was speaking his own love language and not her love language. So let me give you 3 simple ways to discover a person's love language in a healthy relationship, okay? Observe their behavior and observe your behavior. If you or someone that you're relating to is always giving people high fives or pats on the back, probably their love language is physical touch. They're doing to others the way they would receive love. If somebody's always giving gifts to people, you can assume that might well be their love language. They want to receive gifts. You ask yourself, how do I normally relate to people? And chances are you'll see that one of these 5 stands out. And you ask about the other person, how do they relate to people? Then there's a question, here's another question. What do I complain about most often? What do they complain about most often? The complaint reveals the love language. If a wife says to a husband, we just don't ever spend any time together, I just feel like we're passing in the night, she's complaining about lack of quality time. Or if the other person goes on a trip and comes back and you say, you didn't bring me anything, you're clearly revealing that gifts is your love language. So what do you complain about? And then what do you request most often? If you're saying periodically, honey, can we take a walk tonight? You're asking for quality time. If you say, could you give me a back rub? You're asking for physical touch. So you answer those three things, and you can pretty well figure out your primary love language. Now, there is an online free quiz that you can take. 40 million people have taken this quiz, they told me the other day. And you answer 30 questions, and it tells you what your primary love language is. So if your spouse is in the beginning stages of dementia, they can probably still take that quiz. And it'll tell you what your primary, your secondary, and the one that's least important. So imagine now that you get this concept and you learn each other's love language and you start speaking each other's love language. What happens is you feel that deep emotional need to feel loved. Now, how does all this fit when we talk about the dementia patient and the caregiver? Because we know that dementia is a downward journey. It's going through, it doesn't get better, it gets more difficult as time goes on. And I don't want to tell you how I got into this field in applying this to patients with dementia. Dr. Ed Shaw is a medical doctor. He was the head of the radiology oncology department at the Winston-Salem Baptist Hospital here in Winston-Salem, where I live. His wife came down with Alzheimer's at the age of 53. He became so interested in the disease and her that he actually resigned his position, went back to the university, and did a master's in counseling. He then came back to the hospital and started the memory counseling clinic. And what he would do, let me say this first. He and his wife had come to my marriage seminar several years earlier when she was still healthy. And they had found this love language concept very, very helpful in their marriage. So what he would do, when one of them was diagnosed with dementia, they would come to him for counseling. And while they still had pretty well cognitive abilities, he would teach them this concept, the 5 love languages. And he would teach them that, he has a love language and she has a love language. Let's discover what that is, and let's learn how to speak that. What he was trying to do was to get them emotionally connected to each other in the deepest possible way as they begin this dementia journey. Well, his assistant, Debbie Barr, had been my assistant 28 years ago when I wrote the 5 love languages. And so she was taking his notes and seeing what he was doing. And she said, you and Dr. Chapman need to get together and write a book on this and how this applies with the dementia patients. So he contacted me, and we sat down and had a talk together. And then I started attending the support groups that he offered, much like Wellspring offers there. And what he would do, he would work with the couple individually as long as there was cognitive ability. But when the cognitive ability was gone, then he would do the support group with the caregivers. And I listened to the stories of the caregivers, and my heart was deeply, deeply moved. Of course, my mother had dementia, so I'd gone through that. My brother-in-law had dementia, and I'd gone through that. I really wanted to work with him on this book. And we wrote a book, Keeping Love Alive as Memories Fade, the 5 love languages and the Alzheimer's journey. And it's not that they keep the same love language throughout the whole journey, because different parts of the brain are being affected depending on the type of dementia that the patient has. But the love languages gives you 5 simple ways to reach out and try to touch them emotionally. And what we do know is that the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain, is still alive. Even when the cognitive abilities are gone, they can still feel love virtually to the end of the journey. And so, since these are the 5 basic ways we receive love, you try different ones at different times, and you will likely see that you will touch them. And when you touch them, you will see a response. For example, Dr. Shaw said that his wife, Rebecca, her love language was not gifts when she was healthy. But he said near the end of the journey, when she had lost all of her ability to speak, and apparently all the cognitive abilities were basically gone, he said, when I would give her an ice cream cone, she would say, ooh, ooh, ooh. He said, I could go on that for 3 weeks. You know, I knew I had touched her in a deep way. My wife's brother, who was professor at Appalachian State University, was in the final stages of Alzheimer's. And my wife went up to see him. By this time, he was in a facility. His wife kept him at home as long as she could. But he was at the stage where he had no verbal ability. He would simply sit there and look straight ahead. If you sat to his right or his left, he wouldn't look at you. If you sat in front of him, he'd look straight at you. And he had no response. So my wife sat in front of him, and my wife is a musician. So she said, I'm going to just see if maybe I'll sing some old songs that he might know and see how he responds. So she sang a couple of old songs like You Are My Sunshine, and there was no response. And then she sang, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. And he reached out and put his hand on her hand, and tears came to his eyes. And she knew she had touched him. That was the last memory she had of her brother, because 3 weeks later, he died. So what I'm saying is the emotional part of the brain is still alive. They can still feel love. And what does this do for the caregiver? Great satisfaction in knowing that you have touched them in a very, very deep way. You know, we know that in the brain there are what we sometimes call happy chemicals, you know. And when you do certain things and touch certain parts of the brain and do certain things, there's an emotional response. For example, just laughter, just pure laughter can release endorphins, which gives you a good feeling. In fact, why don't we pause here in the middle of all this and just laugh out loud, every one of us, just laugh. Come on, laugh. If you laugh, you feel better. It does something to you, okay? And then we know that some of the other, serotonin and oxytocin and other things, when you're touched and various things happen. But dopamine comes when the caregiver sees a response on the other person's part. There's something good and exciting about that. It ministers to you emotionally as well as ministering to the individual. So those are that's the basic concept of this book. Now, we do in the book deal with the various stages, which many of you are familiar with, the stages of dementia, and then how to relate to some of those stages. And I know I walked with my mother through that. I remember when she got to the stage where she had the delusion that somebody was stealing her money. And she said to me, somebody's been coming in here and stealing my money. And I said, really? And she said, yeah. She said, and I hid it. And I said, well, where did you put it, Mom? And she said, I don't know. Okay. And then I would go down and see her every week, and because I lived about an hour away, and I had caretakers with her around the clock. And I would take her out to, when she was still able, take her out to lunch. And then we would go by my dad's grave. And then we would drive off. We'd talk about Dad and my sister, who's also deceased, and have time together there. Then we'd drive out of the cemetery, and a block away, she would say, now, the next time you come down here, I want you to take me to see Sam's grave. She didn't remember that she'd been there. So if you are a caregiver for a dementia patient, these things ring with you. You know what this is all about. And things get worse as it goes along, and so we kind of give the stages so that people will kind of get the picture of where the journey's leading. And then we also talk about, how do you respond when they have paranoid delusions? I remember one guy, his wife said to him, she was the patient, she said to him, I think you're seeing somebody else. And he said, honey, what I hear you saying is you think I'm seeing somebody else? Some other woman? He said, you see this ring? We've been married 50 years. He said, I would never see somebody else. You're my wife and I love you. Now let's go out on the deck and get some coffee. And he was demonstrating, which you may well be familiar with, when there's those kind of delusions, you acknowledge what they said, and then you affirm the truth, and then you redirect them, and you change them and channel them into something else. So you get the mind off of that, at least for the moment. So what you learn in the groups and all that meet at Wellspring and the counseling and all that goes on there and other places like here locally at our hospital, you learn how to cope with the patient and how to make the most of where they are in the journey. And but the love factor adds a whole new dimension to it when you understand this, that they genuinely can feel love even toward the end of the journey. And these 5 ways, these 5 love languages gives you 5 ways to do that. So I hope that you'll find this helpful. And I did want to mention this also. Debbie Barr, who I mentioned was his Dr. Shaw's assistant and helped us with the writing of this book, Keeping Love Alive as Memories Fade. She also wrote a devotional book for those of you that want a spiritual dimension. It's written to the caregiver, and it's called Grace for the Unexpected Journey. And it's a 60-day devotional for Alzheimer's and other dementia caregivers. And you can find out more about both of these at that same website I gave you earlier where you get the free quiz. It's the number 5, 5lovelanguages.com. And you can get a little blurb on both of those books. You can order those books from there or Amazon or anywhere you like. But we have really been encouraged by the response that we've had to this book because, again, the most fundamental emotional need we have as humans is the need to feel loved. And that need is still there with us, even as we take the journey, the dementia journey. And when you realize that you can still meet that need and communicate to them, it gives you a deep satisfaction knowing that you are still reaching out and touching them. Now, they can't touch you, okay? Toward the end of the journey, they can't touch you. And Dr. Warden's going to talk about that and what do you do to meet your own needs and your own need for love. But I would just throw out this one idea, and that is make sure that all your family knows your love language. So when your spouse gets to where they can't communicate, at least they can communicate to you love in their love language. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Dr. Warden. And then afterwards, we're going to have a little Q&A. So feel free to be thinking about your questions as we move along. So Dr. Warden, take it away.
All right, Dr. Chapman, thank you. Well, y'all, I get to speak with Dr. Chapman right often, and so I always like to acknowledge my partnership with him all these years is a great privilege. I tell folks it's like winning the American Idol of writing to have gotten the chance to write a couple of books with him. And so I'm always pleased to have that chance. I'm also pleased to have a chance just to sit here with you today. I figure, if you're giving up precious minutes of your day, it means something. You're doing something right just for your own self-care, for starters, but it means something. Of all the other things you have to do, you decided to give time to this today. So thank you to Wellspring and Healthy Relationships Initiative for sponsoring this as well. Well, listen, of all the good measures you can take to manage caregiving stress, at best, you're still going to be tired and sometimes even overwhelmed. And I just want to recognize that as we start to now shift our thoughts to self-care. I also want to acknowledge that as difficult as it is to be a caregiver, some of you are also caregiving with family members or friends with whom you did not always have a positive relationship. That adds an extra element of stress and uncertainty, maybe even bitterness at times, that you have landed in this position, and yet you have some ambiguous feelings there, or ambivalent feelings of wanting to help and yet feeling some unfinished business. And so I want to recognize that, not only tired in general and maybe overwhelmed, but some of you having that unfinished business that you continue to try to navigate on your end now, more so mutually. And you still have other life responsibilities playing out. Some of you are parents still to younger children. Some of you have young adult children that you are still shepherding. And some of you are just trying to fulfill the later chapters of your own life in our caregiving. And still, I want to use a kind word, but still strapped in some ways, wishing you had the freedom. And I just want to acknowledge these things because Dr. Chapman and I both know we're sitting with an audience full of diverse stories. Well, and no matter what your story, you need help and you need to help yourself. I know I'm often looking for the answer. Could you just tell me, right, the answer? And there are some answers like that there, but it's also a matter of not just the answer coming to me, but me having to find the answer and having to help myself. And so in these next several minutes, my hope is that I'm going to be able to encourage you in general, but also with some few concrete reminders maybe and steps for self-care and relationship care. I'm going to pair those things together, that relationship care ultimately is going to spring from self-care. Well, to start off with, and I'm going to stick kind of with a 5 love languages theme here now, coming out of the love languages and that Dr. Chapman was just sharing, and certainly that being a part of the When Memories Fade book as well. So that's a great book, Dr. Chapman. Thank you, and Dr. Shaw and Debbie Barr for that book. I'm going to use a word picture love tank that Dr. Chapman used years ago in the initial 5 love languages book. And you all know that picture right off. Just even if you've never heard it, just instinctively, anyone that's been around vehicles, you may would think, well, if I don't put gas in the tank, we're not going anywhere, right? Many of us did not grow up with electronic gas gauges that very regularly tell us you're getting low. There's a dinging sound of some sort, and it's letting us know we're getting low and we need to, go ahead and act on that or suffer the consequences. Well, many of us didn't grow up with those electronic gauges. We grew up with the old gauge and the needle. We would have to watch the needle. We would also have to trust that that needle would tell us when our gas gauge was low. So not only had we needed to watch it, but we would have to have trusted it to let us know that our gas level, our gas tank was low. Now keep in mind, you're smart, so you're already making the parallel jump there. Love tank. We don't have a needle, do we? We don't have an electronic gauge. And even if we had one or the other, we would still have to not only notice, but we'd have to trust that that gauge was reading correctly. Once we did that, we would still have the choice that we ever had, which was to go and fill up. Well, that word picture, love tank, gas tank, there's the parallel, is very similar as, and I want you to be thinking about that in these next several minutes, because some of this, you know how it is when you're listening to somebody talk, some of it will be something I say that maybe is encouraging, but much of it will be what you make of what I'm saying, and maybe in your own thoughts there, what you're generating to make this more relevant to you. But I at least wanted to start us with a common ground there, a love tank, and with the idea ultimately in terms of self-care, if I'm not putting into my love tank, if I'm not caring for myself, I'm going to not be as well in loving or caring for other people. And so I'm having, and you're going to hear again some common language here, I'm going to have to notice my self-care or my love tank. I'm going to have to notice this, and then I'm going to have to believe myself, right? Trust. If I'm feeling low in my love tank or in my self-care, I'm going to have to actually heed that warning, and then I'm going to have to take some steps. Some of you are great. Y'all are regularly thinking self-care, and again, I'm just adding in that love tank piece there because it connects us to the love languages, and it's also, as we move along here, you're going to hear me reference back to those 5 specific love languages as ways that you can love yourself, you can care for yourself, if you will. So hang on, it's coming, but we've got a word picture, we're talking self-care, and we're balancing back and forth now. So some of you are great at that. You're already making time to care for yourself on a regular basis. Some of you, your needle is stuck and you have stopped on the road somewhere long ago and needing AAA, Dr. Chapman, somebody to come alongside you and say, hey, it's time to pour some self-care. It's time to pour some love into that tank. So wherever you're at on that continuum, someone who's really attentive to self-care and thereby relationship care, or some who are maybe would be attentive but just haven't had the focus lately, and some just know that is so far off my radar. Wherever you fall fall on that continuum, I hope that you'll hear something here that might be either a reinforcement of something you're already doing or a fresh idea that might encourage you to take new action. Well, first, how is it that we love anyone else if we don't care for ourselves, right? If our tank is low. And so this first part of these next few minutes is just filling our own tank. The next part is asking for and allowing others to help fill your tank. And then I'll go back to where Dr. Chapman was at and offer a few additional thoughts on giving love language specific care to your loved one that's affected by dementia. But just again, y'all, before you can care as well as you can for your loved one with dementia, you need to be able to love and care for yourself. And you need to be able to ask for and allow others to care for you. So let's start there. First of all, how is it that you are filling your love tank? Now keep in mind, intentionality is a key word. Y'all, we hear this all over the place anymore. Be intentional, great. But you can't have heard that so many times that you actually fail to be intentional. So we can't just hear it, we need to actually do as well. So you're going to want to be intentional now as I talk about the love languages in terms of self-care. You're going to have to be intentional about thinking about these things, about noticing your needle, your gauge. Am I low? Am I okay? Am I high on this self-care? And so let's start now with words of affirmation. As Dr. Chapman said, we all are going to tend toward one or maybe two of the love languages, typically one primarily. And if any of these five may speak to you more specifically, but Dr. Chapman, you said it as well. We do good when we work to speak all of the love languages. We inevitably have some of a lot of the love languages, but we have a primary love language, usually one over the others, but we're going to do well to speak all of them. Now, speaking into ourselves, self-care, words of affirmation. Are you affirming yourself? Positive thoughts. I work with someone who is trying regularly on a regular basis to be intentional about reminding themselves of the positive attributes, of the positive contributions that they have, that they make. Positive thoughts, a list on our nightstand. Yes, I'm serious. Writing these things down. I'm a good friend. I'm a good mom. I manage my money well. I remember to take out the trash. I brush my teeth at least once a day. I don't know, whatever you need to do there, but it's a list because sometimes you're low, your needle is low, and what are you doing? You're trying to build back up your love tank, and in this case, the self-care element of love. We are doing for ourselves rather than just hoping a passerby, a family, a friend, someone who's going to come by and pour love in. We need that. We definitely need that. We are relational people. That's another reason COVID has been so hard on us. Even the introverts in us actually miss some of the relational filling of tanks that happens when we engage with other people. But right now I'm just talking about you and I noticing our gauge and affirming ourselves in this case. Sticky notes on our mirror. You're beautiful. That tie looks good on you. That t-shirt is a great color. Whatever you got, you gotta give yourself the affirmations you can give yourself. Actually rereading those positive reminders and rereading positive reminders from times past, maybe opening up a card that someone gave you and it had been so meaningful to you. Go get that out, read it again and again and again and again in this journey that you're on right now, in particular, trying to pour so much love into other people's lives. Not only the family member or loved one that has dementia, but the other family and friends and coworkers that you are trying to pour into. You're doing so much of that. Again, you've got to watch your own tank, your own needle, intentionally noticing when you're low, intentionally noticing you could use a little boost, and trying not to run out so much. That comes from a person, y'all. Can you keep this secret? I've run out of gas 3 times in my life. And that's embarrassing, one of which just happened a few years ago. Please don't judge me. But I was not paying attention. Wasn't paying attention. What do you and I need to do? We need to pay attention. Let's move now. Physical touch. you're thinking, oh, Shannon, how am I going to actually pour into myself self-care through physical touch? Hang with me. I've got some ideas. You use that good brain of yours as well and generate some ideas perhaps too. Well, obviously, if you're getting touch from other people, that's wonderful. But again, what about relaxing into your favorite chair? Some of you are very practiced in mindfulness, and this is an activity that sometimes you see with counselors and folks who practice mindfulness, that we just relax into our chair and we feel the fabric or the material, and we allow, or we notice, right? We're intentional about noticing how that chair hugs us, cradles us, and you're like, Shannon, come on, that's not physical touch. Well, it is us being more consciously aware of the things that are touching us, the materials, the space, even our hands on our hands. Try that, right? When you're lotioning your hands, there is a massaging effect that's happening there. That is a relaxation technique. And there are many others, y'all. There's no way in this short amount of time that that me talking about rocking on your porch or patting your leg or massaging your hands. I mean, there's no way that I can get to all of the thoughts out there, but between you and I, we're at least generating a few. How am I going to fill my tank, my love tank, in terms of self-care, physical touch? These touches, these recognitions remind us, I'm okay, I'm here, right? I'm okay, I'm here. You forget that sometimes as a busy and overwhelmed caregiver. You're so focused, understandably, on loving that person, on caring for that person, that you forget our tank runs low. And what are you doing? I'm calling you now just as a reminder, hey, make time for yourself. Don't let your tank run so low. Even now, before you're hoping for the touch from everybody else, you're even just spending time in the day, making time to recognize your surroundings, to be fully present in those surroundings. Quality time, that may be a cup of coffee or watching a program or reading a book and listening to music, any of these activities that help you to slow down and recover. This is an example from the category of quality time of giving yourself that care, filling that tank, if you will. Acts of service. You may need to go to the doctor. You might need to get those tires rotated, visit a friend. Some of you really need to fold your clothes, okay? Fold your clothes. You know, and these are all you and I doing for ourselves an act of service. And oh my goodness, y'all, I know life is stacking up on you all around. That feeds into your stress. You need to run over and care for your mom. Or you need to care for this person or that person, whomever you're caring for. And yet all of these other responsibilities are stacking up and stressing you out. Even if you can budget a minute or two here or there to serve yourself just a little bit, you know, do it, okay? Just try it, because if you do run out of self-care, right? We can always get it back. That's the good news. Someone will come along. We, in fact, will take a walk, as I did my walk of shame over to the gas station. It was just a mile away from when I most recently ran out of gas. Dr. Chapman, I'm going to need counsel on this later. It's been a couple of years, so but still, it happened. It's in my resume. But we're going to have to make time. So even if you run out, if you run it low, if you're running okay, unless you're running totally high on acts of service towards yourselves, you might need to heed this as a reminder. And yes, gifts for yourself, perhaps a Snickers or your other favorite candy bar, a walk, or new socks. Who doesn't love new socks? Come on. And y'all, I'm being fun because humor is fun and it's also good for self-care, but I'm also just trying to give you a break here mentally, not only giving some ideas to you, but just encouraging you with a little levity there of intentionally reminding yourself in the little ways and the big ways to care for yourself. Well, the second part of what I said I would share with you is asking and allowing others to fill your love tank. I want to recognize that you might be it caring for your person. You might be it. You might have family, siblings who are not doing what you perceive them needing to do, and that is very hurtful. You maybe have lost siblings over time, or maybe never had. You may be the one. And so I recognize that you don't always have care from others, your spouse, partner. You might not always have the support of other people, children who are old enough or willing enough to help. But I want to recognize that, and yet I'm going to speak very generally. Words of affirmation, asking a family member or a friend to affirm you. For example, I even sometimes say to my kids, do you all think I'm doing okay? What could I do better? You know, and my husband knows that my love language is words of affirmation. And so after years and years of training, 22 years to be exact, plus a lot of dating years, he's a really well-trained husband. I'm very proud of him. And he will say, Shannon, I really appreciate that you emptied the dishwasher, or, hey, I see you working so hard, or, and I just really appreciate you're doing that for our family, right? There's no shame in us asking. I will ask Stephen, hey, I'm feeling low. You got anything for me? Just something that'll help fill me up here a little bit. There's no shame in asking. And I also, though, I need to allow people. Some of us are so good at, oh, that's nothing. Don't, it was no problem. Allow yourself intentionally to receive those words of affirmation. Don't just dismiss that as a passing comment, but because you're looking for ways to raise that gauge, to raise that tank level, that love tank, that self-care level, your relationships, the quality of your relationships during this very difficult time, because you're looking for opportunities to improve. Notice, be intentional to receive those words of affirmation. Same with physical touch. Ask for it. Hey, could I have a hug? You know, now don't ask the stranger on the street. That could be a little weird, but I'm saying with somebody that you trust, right? That, you know, you just, or even reach for yourself, someone that you know can receive a hug. Just give that side hug, right? Give that, as Dr. Chapman said, that high five. You're making contact, you're initiating it. And in essence, that isn't asking for. You're initiating that high five, or that, you know, that side hug there. Hey, thanks so much. It's just so good to see you. And certainly y'all receive it. You know, for some of you, you're not touch people. So just pretend like I never said that, okay? You don't have to receive a touch you don't want, because some of you are like, oh no, please don't touch me. And so that is not going to apply to everybody. But if you are a touch person in particular, ask for and allow and notice. That's going to be a key, y'all, for any of this, truthfully, is that you noticed that these were needed, and then you took action to fill that tank. Not only waiting for someone else to fill, but yourself taking action. Quality time. Do you want to take a walk? I just texted a good friend this morning. Do you want to take a walk? You want to meet out on certain place, certain date? Because I'm missing some quality time with that person, and so I'm asking for that. And when someone says, you want to get coffee? Receive it. Yeah, I do. I don't think I've got any time, but I'm going to do that for myself. Remember the tank, that love tank, that self-care, that relational tank now. Yeah, I do. I would love to do that. Gifts. Y'all, there's no shame. Ask somebody, hey, you gonna be out? Could you get me some hand lotion? What about a chapstick, a Snickers? Could you get me a Snickers? You know, and ask for that. Some of you are really good in this area. You might say, hey, I just really need a new garden flag. Wow, I would really love to have 2 new rocking chairs. I don't, you know, the sky's the limit, you know, but ask and certainly receive when someone says, hey, I picked you up this little thing. Receive it. Recognize that it is, in fact, an act of love, an act of support, of encouragement. Receive it. Think about it, though, y'all. If we're not watching our tank, whew, I'm feeling low. It's been so hard these last several weeks. Dad is, you know, progressing. He's getting worse. By the way, I wanted to share with you, my father passed away in 2017 with Lewy body dementia, and that was so incredibly hard to watch. My heart just goes out to all of y'all who are engaged right now actively in your caregiving journeys. Well, just really quickly, I wanted to fold back into that you, based on your own self-care and your relational care, that I'm very quickly moving across. I know Healthy Relationships Initiative and Wellspring are going to make this video available later, I believe. So watch back if it's encouraging to you what Dr. Chapman and I have shared here. But quickly now, you're able better to love your person with dementia because you have done these things. So it's not only self-care and relationship care, but it's also helping in a very hard situation prepare you even better to deal with maybe some of the worst struggles that you've ever dealt with. I have never heard anyone say of a caregiving journey that it was so easy. And even if it were easy at times, it didn't stay easy indefinitely. So again, you know, you're now maybe a little better positioned to say to that loved one, you look so nice in that color. They might not understand what you're saying, but rather than saying, oh, how many more times is somebody going to take the wrong clothes and put their clothes in your closet? Right, that happened to my daddy. You know, he was wearing a shirt one day that he would have never worn in his good mind, and I said, "Well, Daddy, that shirt looks nice on you," you know. And it became, because I was in a healthy place, I could speak more love into his life. And so, noticing the color, noticing their hair has been combed, little words of affirmation like that, those positive messages, perhaps even referencing back to a long ago positive message. I remember when you mowed the neighbor's yard because they were sick. Remember that? And they won't remember, but the tone in your voice, the sweet recollection for yourself is life-giving, and the tone, the energy that you are casting out in that space between you and your loved one is a positive energy. And again, it all came from watching the needle, watching that tank, and doing your best with energy and time that you thought you didn't have, to even take the small seconds that you needed to affirm, to touch, to spend a few minutes with that coffee, to have your tires rotated, right, etc. There, it's those few seconds that you didn't think you have. It then flowed into a warmer hand on your loved one's hand, a caring pat on the shoulder. Carefully, I understood with my dad, his bones became very frail, and it was hurtful to touch. And so obviously we have to be careful with our touches, but quality time, even you're there with them, just in that space, even for those few minutes, you're fully present, and that is an act of quality time. Obviously you're doing tons of service and offering up tons of gifts, but to close out here, the extra piece that I'm adding to that is you are actually seeing those as gifts of love, versus what typically I think you experience is, you're so stressed, I've got to go do, I don't feel like it, I need to be doing this, so and so should be over there. Well, it gives you just that little bit extra grace and compassion and energy, because you have been loving into your own life, that you now can hopefully notice, intentionally noticing that these are all wonderful acts of love that you are conveying to those precious loved ones. And so, listen, that's all I've got time for, but I hope I have said something encouraging to you in this, thinking about that needle, and noticing, and intentionally, maybe even giving yourself some credit, affirming yourself for all the good that you're doing in that loved one's life. Dr. Murray.
Yes, thank you to both of you, Dr. Chapman and Dr. Warden. It was so great learning for you. We haven't had any questions that have come through the chat room, but I would love if we, before we wrap up, to just hear some final thoughts and takeaway points that you hope that people will have learned through our program today.
Yeah, well, I would say if you can leave with the concept that you have a love language and the patient has a love language, and meeting that need is meeting the most fundamental emotional need you have. You keep that on the front burner of your mind, because I know there's a lot of other stuff you got to deal with. I mean, all the physical care and all of that, I mean, it's draining. But this emotional need, keep it on the front burner, because we're emotional creatures. And the patient needs to feel loved, and you need to feel loved. And I would just add, affirm what Dr. Warden was saying. Let your extended family know what your love language is, so that if they want to love you, they know what will speak most deeply to you. Now, all 5 of them are good. I mean, you don't turn away any one of them, but make sure they know what your primary love language is, so that they can be most effective in communicating love to you. So what she said is fully as important as what I said about meeting the need of the patient, is meeting your own needs. So those would be my thoughts. And Dr. Warden?
I'm really sensitive to family members that don't have other family, or either just literally there's no one, and or just there are emotional issues, relational issues. And so I know there's bound to be someone that's watching this, listening to this, that is dealing with that. And that would be one of the questions. And certainly it's one that I have fielded a lot. What do I do? And it's not a great answer. I'm going to tell you, y'all. You're like, what? Yeah, it's not, because you're having to accept, if after you've done your best, after you've approached that person and you've said, listen, I really could use some help. After you've done that, after you've even gone to the real specific level, because some people are waiting for you, whether you like it or not. I mean, I don't always like to have to give point by point. She's going to need socks, and she's going to need, more, peppermint candies, or right. I don't want to necessarily have to give all of that fine detail, but if after you've generally said, hey, I really could use your help, and then you specifically said, can you pick up this or this, or dad's got this doctor's appointment, can you help him get there? I'm not going to be able, after you've generally said and specifically said, if those people still are not really showing up at a helpful rate for you, for one, I hope you will get counseling, and or have someone, a good friend or someone, if not a professional counselor, to go to, just to be able to vent that stress. That is terrible stress. I've heard it many, many times. And I just want to say it's not a great answer. Like, I can't give you a magic, here's what you need to do. You'd have already found it if it was that easy. But again, generally you've done your best, even then going specifically, hopefully one of those two help. And then if not, that's going to become one of those real sad points of grief for you, that you're having to do this in some ways that maybe feel alone. I will say, and it sounds like Wellspring is doing awesome. I was so, Jody, and loving hearing all of the resources that you all are offering there. You doesn't always have to be family or friends. You can reach out and let these wonderful resources help you in this journey, okay? Because I know some of us are like, oh, it's just got to be family. No, it actually doesn't. There are lots of other really good resources too. So I know there's not the fast answer of, oh, just do this, but there are a few hopefully helpful encouragement, pieces of encouragement to you right there.
Those are both great thoughts, kind of final thoughts and takeaway points. And actually, we did have one question that came in, and I think you sort of spoke to this already, Shannon, but it really relates to what you were just saying. And the question was really, how can community volunteers, community members help with aging members in our area, especially during COVID? And I would say, how can they support, to add to that too, how can they offer support to caregivers? Do you have any suggestions real quick? I know we're almost out of time, but any quick suggestions?
Dr. Chapman, I've got a quick one, and you may want to come in with another one, but I think, Christine, the way I'm fielding that question is just reach out to the Wellsprings and ask, what needs do you have? I know too, in our church at the beginning of COVID in particular, one of the congregants had an idea of, can we have a phone chain for all of our seniors who are homebound? And so that was her taking initiative. What did she do? She noticed, and then she acted intentionally, took initiative. And I think we were calling like 200 or some seniors for the period of a few months, very regularly, a daily, weekly basis, just to make sure they had support. So, Christine, people can absolutely contact lots of local helping groups and just say, hey, I'm available, or how can I help? Dr. Chapman, anything else?
Yeah, I think the other thing I would say is that, here in the South, people will say, if I can ever help you, let me know. And usually we don't take it serious. I would say, take it serious. If anybody says that to you in a phone call or anywhere, if I can ever help you, let me know. You go write their name down and their phone number down. And when you need something, you call them and say, I remember the other day when you said da-da-da-da-da. Well, here's something, I don't know if you can do it or not, but here's something that will really be helpful for me. And because they said that, they will do it. They will do it. The other thing I would say is to those who are not in a caregiving situation, if you know anyone who is a caregiver of a dementia patient, during this COVID time especially, give them a call on the phone and just ask, how are you doing? So you can be, as it were, a counselor to them, and they can share with you some of the stress and some of the things they're feeling, or some of the good things that are happening. So don't just say, should I call them? No, you go ahead and call them.
That is such a great suggestion, that especially with so much more distancing and isolation, people need people to be actually actively reaching out to offer that support too. So we are at the end of our time. Unfortunately, I wish I could stay and listen to you both just talk all day, but thank you both so much, Dr. Chapman, Dr. Warden. We really appreciate your insights, and I know that everybody who was here really appreciates all of the wisdom and insights that you shared today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to everybody who joined us for this program, as well as our participants in the audience. Camilla has posted a link to a feedback form. We always ask for people's input and suggestions around our programming through the Healthy Relationships Initiative. And feel free to reach out to us if you have any follow-up questions as well. But thanks to everybody for being here today. And we hope that you learned a lot from this program. Have a great afternoon.